yeah, we have like tomatoes here, tomatoes over here. We have a few different varieties.
Solarization, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so this has been covered all season actually, and that's been kind of like the nice thing with how big City Farm is like we don't need to grow on every available space here. And like that's a thing that like a lot of people for generations, honestly, that in like a lot of like Western practices of farming haven't really adopted until like there's been like a kind of like a resurgence of like this indigenous knowledge in a lot of places of like understanding soils as an ecosystem, and that like just as an ecosystem, like there needs to be this sort of like balance in maintaining that ecosystem. So it's fine, and we encourage it. Spaces at the farm that like we just don't grow. We didn't grow anything this year, and we solarized it. It's gonna be really nice underneath and ready to grow. But like the nutrients have not been depleted in this swatch of land because like we haven't grown here. And so we'll still add our amendments. We'll still make sure that the nutrient content is where it needs to be. But like we can grow here next year, and it's gonna be whatever's growing here is gonna do great because like the soil has been undisturbed for a year.
Tell me about. You mentioned before the what is it, the Aphids or not the Aphids? You were telling me earlier about the finches and the birds and the
purple finches.
Yeah, the
purple finches. Yeah. So I was explaining to you that like aphids, aphids. Yeah, the aphids. Aphids can like wreak havoc on like a lot of crops. And when I was volunteering here 4 years ago, they had really bad aphid problem, and I was like really grossed out by them, and like incoming and managing.
So these are like bugs.
They're little bugs. Aphids are little bugs. Yeah, if you don't know what they look like, you should look it up. They're really gross, but they're like look like little pieces of rice, like half of a piece of rice, and they live in like these clusters, and so they all like live next to each other on plants, and so a lot of times they live like underneath the leaf of a plant, and they'll just like feed on it, and they are eating the nutrients from the plant. And so if the aphids get bad, like worse enough, like you can kill a plant. A lot of times like there might be a few aphids, a plant will be fine. But I wanted to like be proactive about like how I would address that. And so like one thing, aphids don't like onions, and so they don't like onions, they don't like garlic. So like we'll also plant onions and garlic amongst our what we're growing, just like periodically to like have it there. That's one deterrent. You took a photo of the marigolds over there, French marigolds. Those are also a deterrent for aphids, and actually like rabbits don't like marigolds too, so that's like a way to like kind of keep some rabbits away.
There are a lot of rabbits in the city.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, continue the story at the
Yeah.
I gotta ask you.
No, we'll get back to the rabbits. Yeah. And so in like kind of trying to determine how I was going to deal with aphids, we hadn't had any like a problem with them, but I just wanted to like deal with it beforehand. And so I found out that purple finches really enjoy aphids. They eat aphids, and they are a migratory species that does like pass through Chicago and like a lot of the Midwest during the summer. And so I was like, okay, we got to get some purple finches here. How can we do that? And one of my colleagues had told me about this like bird speaker that she had seen at like another farm that was essentially just like playing out bird calls of species that they wanted to attract to the farm. And so I literally just like had my cell phone, and for 3 days, like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, went on YouTube and on a loop played the purple finch call. And at the end of those 3 days, I came in on Monday, and I came in like a bunch of the purple finches were here, and I found out, you know, that they really like the seeds of brassica. So we just had some of those mustards. Those are brassicas, right? And the flowers will eventually go to seed. So I left a bunch of those brassicas. I think they were turnips. I left them in the field, let the flowers turn brown. That means they're like producing the seed. The seed was ready. And so when I came in, all of the purple finches were like hanging out in the brassica seeds, eating those, and then they stuck around because they realized, right, that there's a wealth of nutrients here for them. And so they were here all summer. They've since left because they are migratory birds, but we had them here. They helped keep the aphids away. They fed on some of the seeds that we had available, and they're just like really lovely birds, and that added to the diversity of the ecosystem here, because like the farm itself is an ecosystem, whether it's the soil, whether it's above ground, whether it's like what's existing in the trees around here. So like we also serve as an ecosystem to the wildlife in the area. And speaking to like rabbits, we do have rabbits here.
There's so many rabbits in Chicago.
Yeah,
they're like
absolutely.
all over the place. So how do you keep them out? Or
it's never been. I mean, we don't want them here necessarily. Like we don't attract we don't want to attract them here, but they are going to be here. And I mean, in any area, any like landmass, right, you're always going to have some like occupants, and a lot of time like rodent occupants. I'd rather have rabbits than rats, and just like any area in the city, there's going to be rats. We don't have like a rat problem, but like there are rats here. There are rats everywhere. But we do also have, we work with these people who essentially like distribute feral cats across the city. And so like we work with these people who have brought cats to our other farm sites, and we have like a little enclosure just outside of our fence over there that like they come every week and they stock it with food, stock it with water, but they like acclimated the cats here. So we have 3 cats who like live here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so they just like are always just kind of like,
they'll do their thing.
yeah, and so they live here and are always just around. Like you'll sometimes walk up on them and see them. But so they kind of help with that. But that's also the thing too, is like we don't like create conditions where pests like that would thrive. Like we don't have a rat problem because like we have a lot of food, but like our food doesn't just like rot. Like you're gonna see like a tomato here or there that just like fell off and it's like whatever, like we're not gonna be able to eat it. It's starting to like decay. But like we don't have mass amounts of food here that are rotting. We are frequently harvesting, and so that doesn't create a condition. Like rats aren't going after tomatoes on the vine, like unripe tomatoes on the vine, right? Rats are going, like there's so much trash in the city that like the smell attracts the rats, right? So there's other things around here that are actually like attracting rats, and yeah, rats are probably gonna pass through, but like just the other day we were watching a hawk, and there's like hawks that come here now, and you'll see them periodically like circling, and like they'll be like in the thicket like going after something. And so they're like, we create that ecosystem. We've seen coyotes here, and so like there are natural predators, right? And like those sort of like apex predators in like this area are a sign of a healthy ecosystem, because there are these various levels, these iterations of species that are living here that are interdependent.
Define an ecosystem, like in, not just specific to City Farm here, but just in general.
Yeah, I mean, an ecosystem.
How can it relate to really all types of different
For sure. Ecosystems, I mean, are really just like an environment that organisms are functioning. Right? So like you could have your ecosystem at work, right? And like your ecosystem at work would consist of your colleagues, would consist of like probably like the hierarchy of the people like working in that office space, would consist of, depending on like what type of office it is. If you have a cafeteria, like then you have like people who are part of that same ecosystem, but like a different component of it, who are like operating in that, where you have maybe the business side then. And so like, yeah, I mean, ecosystems are everywhere. But like, I think, as it pertains to City Farm, we're looking to foster, an ecosystem that exists within our farm, but then we're also looking to like improve, to increase the quality of our urban ecosystem that like we are all living in together.
So it's like this right here, this plot of land is an ecosystem in itself, but this plot of land and what you produce here serves a greater ecosystem. And it's just like
macro level, absolutely. And that's like,
that.
and as you zoom out, as you zoom in, you start to see these, and that exists within us individually, right? Like we have like the human who's living in the ecosystem, but then within us we have microbes that are living in the ecosystem that are us, right? And so like it's just like each iteration, it's pretty like trippy, right? But like, but that's like what, you know, bringing us closer to nature like is understanding, is that like an ecosystem is only an ecosystem because it exists and is reliant upon these other systems, right? It's like an ecosystem, right? And no system consists of like one individual component, right? And a lot of times too, it's interesting to think about is like there are aspects of ecosystems that we don't even know are impacting that ecosystem, right? That like we could try to like eliminate aphids, and maybe I find out that aphids were actually like a food source for the purple finches, rather than me like inviting the purple finches, right? Like that, like me getting rid of them, me choosing to harvest all, or like pull out all of this produce that like has flowered, so like it's not good for the purpose that like we want to sell or give our food away, but it's like, oh, I could still actually keep those and they could serve some other purpose in this ecosystem, right? And so there's like constantly things like that. Like it's like, what are the known knowns, what are the known unknowns, what are the unknown unknowns that like we're trying to still be like cognizant of, and like that's a process that like we're constantly learning, but that's all like part of what we're doing is like learning. Like our sustainability, we don't claim to be like a fully sustainable farm, because that's like a process that requires a refinement of these systems to make things sustainable. So like we have sustainable practices and we are moving in that direction and we like practice sustainability, but we're not like sustainable as like the end point and that like we've achieved sustainability, right? It's like, no, like we're constantly learning ways to become more sustainable. And so like when I talk about like the mulching piece, like all of this, like I've never bought a tarp. These is all like just like recycled tarps that we've had. The Chicago Resource Center has access to a lot of like materials that we are able to repurpose. So all these trellises that you see here, these poles, these are just like recycled like metal poles. We post-pound them into the ground and use them as trellises. We get burlap sacks from, and you saw it earlier, the rows that were covered. Yeah. Those are burlap sacks from Intelligentsia Coffee, and we.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and we get deliveries from them, and we repurpose them. They're nice because they're made from burlap, which I believe is like hemp material, and so they'll decay over time, and so we can leave them in the field, and if we choose not to like farm an area, like they'll just decompose. They add nitrogen to the soil, and they're really great for like mulching. We use them for a bunch of different things, and so like understanding that, being able to foster and like form the relationships with the businesses that have these different things that we can upcycle, we can recycle them, to be able to use them is part of the practice of sustainability. And it's like a mindset because it transcends just the farm, right? Then it's like, oh, I started working here and made, you know, like 1/4 of what I was making at my job previously, and had really like thought about, okay, am I gonna be able to like support myself off of this? And it's like, absolutely, because like the lifestyle shift that happened and like that mindset shift that happened of just like, oh, like this sustainability approach can actually like manifest itself in all these aspects in my life. And then that allows us to live more sustainable lives, you know? And so once, like the beautiful thing about City Farm is like we are a living example of that. And so as people become like familiar with us, they spend time here, they start to see those things as well. And this, it doesn't need to manifest itself then as another farm somewhere else that somebody else starts. Like if that happens, great, but then it could also just be how people are starting to think about their lives in these ways that are conducive to sustainability, to just being more responsible to our ecosystem, to our environment, being more like human-centric and like sustainable in what we expect from like our workforce, right? That like a lot of like the practices within like within corporate America are like not sustainable because you have like these high rates of like burnout, and like that's a piece of sustainability too. Yeah. And so yeah, it's really empowering to like be able to think and like see the world through that lens, and kind of practice that farming. Yeah.